Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another exciting video in my opinion, because this is my Owls Magical Reading wrap-up. And I am thrilled to say that I passed my Owls.
You big slut! Good for you! Yay! Come on, you stupid man.
I read a whole 8 books this month, which is crazy. I feel like that's a lot, especially compared to what I normally read. And honestly, this went even better than I can imagine. I found a lot of great books. I think I got a fair amount of 5-star reviews. And even the worst of the books weren't even really that bad. So I was really pumped. I'm super excited, and so I just want to go ahead and get into some of these books. But before I do that, I actually ended up making a mistake when I took the picture originally. Ironically enough, I did not include one of the books, which is Master and Apprentice, in this photo.
What an idiot.
But I did end up getting Soul of the Sword in this picture, which ended up missing for my Owls announcement video because it wasn't in the mail yet. And so I do have reviews written for all of these books, but I'm only going to make a video for 7 of them. One of them, Serpent Dove, I didn't really have a lot to say. It was kind of just okay, and I didn't really see a need to really make a video for it.
No, I totally get it, and that's the thesis.
So that one's not going to see a video, but since I've been reading so much, I haven't been able to actually make all of these videos yet. So I'm going to go ahead and link all my reviews below, and then just as I'm able to get to these book reviews, I'll end up posting those on my channel. But I do want to get this one out first, because I want to celebrate the end of the Owl Readathon, and then I actually want to go ahead and post what I'm reading for the Asian Readathon, because I really want that to get some recognition and get the word out there for anyone who wants to go ahead and start that. So that's going to be my next video, is what I'm going to read for May and the Asian Readathon that Read with Cindy is promoting and hosting. So let's go ahead and jump right into the books that I read. The first book that I read for April is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This was a 5-star book for me. It definitely made the list for one of my favorite books of all times. I loved it. It doesn't have a lot of amazing twists or anything like that. It's you're gonna, for the most part, see what's coming and know what's gonna happen. But honestly, the journey is definitely worth it. We follow a man in his 40s who is gay and he doesn't have a lot of self-esteem, but he ends up going on this journey to the house in the Cerulean Sea, where he ends up meeting these people, and the way they interact is amazing, and what they learn from each other is incredible, and I absolutely loved it. The cover looks beautiful, and I ended up reading this book for my Defense Against the Dark Arts class, which is supposed to be a Grindylow. So the prompt for that is to read a book about a sea or a coast, and just by the title and the cover, it's very clear that this meets that prompt. So I already did go over pretty much what the story is about, but I did also want to add in that essentially this gentleman ends up working for a child protective services for orphanages that house children with magical powers. In this world, there are people with powers. There's also magical creatures, so there's the Fae, and I'm sure other stuff like centaurs and whatever, but they're not super prevalent and the kids that he actually ended up helping with. There's gnomes. It's really cute. It's very diverse. The kids are super interesting, and I absolutely loved it. I highly praise this book for that sense of nostalgia. If you remember back when you were a kid and you read books to in elementary school, or the books that you found just felt kind of wholesome, and maybe you don't really remember every little detail about them, but that feeling of the story really stuck with you. And that's what I loved about this book. I feel even if the specifics kind of fade from your memory, I honestly feel the story and the concept always stays in your heart, and it was beautiful. So yes, extremely strong start to my Owls Readathon, and the book I read after that was Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book of his Reckoner series. I really enjoyed this one. This was a 4-star book. For a while now, I've been wanting to get into a comic book or a superhero novel, and honestly I've had terrible luck. I haven't really found very many good superhero novels at all, and ironically enough, I actually didn't catch this until I started filming this, but pretty much Steelheart's all about a Superman-like character, but he's evil or selfish, and he's pretty much a dictator, and he's not the only one. Everyone with superpowers in this book all kind of turn into sort of selfish, terrible people and kind of dictate the cities and fight over them and stuff like that. And our Superman of this story is Steelheart. He's the main bad guy. later in my review, I'm actually going to talk about a story that's about Superman being bad. So I thought that was kind of ironic. So anyways, this story is about our main character who, when he's younger, Steelheart ends up killing his father, but when he kills his father, he finds out that Steelheart can bleed. So our main character gets a glimpse at what Steelheart's weakness is, but he doesn't actually know it specifically. But he knows somewhere in his head that he can find the answer. So he spends most of his young childhood and teenage years studying epics and studying the Reckoners so that he can join the Reckoners, basically help take down the bad guys. So I thought this book was incredibly fast-paced. In typical Brandon Sanderson fashion, he does set up and give you these breadcrumbs to kind of reveal the events at the end and throughout the book, so I love that. And I really enjoyed it. I give it 4 stars, and I'm looking forward to getting towards the sequel. And Steelheart was actually my prompt for Charms, which is in honor of the spell Lumos Maxima, and so the prompt was to read a book with a white cover. So the book I read after that was The Infinite Noise by Lauren Shippen. I read this for my Muggle Studies class, and the prompt was to read a contemporary novel. This ended up getting about a 3-star for me. It was on the lower scale of all the books that I read. The problems I had with it was that overall the ending felt really rushed. Like, just from like an objective standpoint, I feel like the ending was pretty rushed and wasn't well explained out. In a more subjective and personal note, I feel that the relationship, which is a male-male relationship, which is actually one of the main reasons I read it, but as I was reading it, I just felt like the romance didn't need to happen and it was unnecessary, and I felt like it would have been more impactful if there was actually just a non-romantic relationship. The story is about a main character who's a popular jock who ends up learning he's an empath, and empathy is an ability that's not like mind control, but you can actually just sense and know other people's emotions. And so he ends up actually kind of meeting and getting to know this kid who's kind of down a lot. He doesn't have a lot of friends, and kind of like together they sort of learn more about each other and help kind of get each other over their issues and like falling for each other. So I definitely praise this book for like how gorgeous she writes the powers. I think empathy is an incredible power, the way that she used it here, and I never actually thought about how amazing it could be to write this power, and I absolutely love that. And for the most part, it was still a pretty wholesome and sweet book, so I still liked it. So the book I read after that, and the one that I probably have the least to say, is Serpent Dove. This is by Shelby Mahurin. This I read for my History of Magic book, which the prompt was to read a book about witches, and this book is all about witches. It follows our main character, who has basically run away from her witch coven, is trying to hide from them, and ends up hiding with a group of witch hunters, but of course they don't know she's a witch hunter. I think the best part about this book is that the main character, I thought she was very plucky. I really liked her attitude and the way she kind of fought against this very misogynistic world. It's pretty sexist, actually. And the lead up to the end is pretty interesting. When they start revealing things, they get to the end, it's all like incredibly intense, and there's a lot of reveals. So it's not terrible, but I just don't have a lot to say about it. It didn't like super like overwhelm me with like a really interesting story. I think the worst part about it is probably the world. It seems really bleak. When I first heard about this book, I for some reason imagined her like running off to this like pretty giant mansion or manor on like in the hill, and it's kind of like this really nice town or something. Like, I don't know, but it's all inside this church and like these sort of like Templar like enforcers. It was really bleak, and I didn't have a lot to say by the end of it. So the book I read after that was Soul of the Sword by Julie Kagawa. This is the second book in the Shadow of the Fox series, and I read this for my Transfiguration class, which the subject was to read about shape-shifting, so the prompt was to find a book with a shapeshifter. And in this book, our main character, Yumeko, is a kitsune, so she does turn into a fox. So this was pretty good. Mostly the ending that tied everything up made it worth it to read, but I had a lot of issues reading throughout the book. That's why I only gave it a 3-star. I felt like I feel like she really dragged out how long it took for us to get to the end, and she had 2 point of views. So she had 3 point of views total, but only but two of them I really didn't care for. One was the bad guy's perspective, which in hindsight, I kind of realized why she had the bad guy's perspective when you get to the end, but I still didn't enjoy it and understand like why I was seeing his perspective as I was going on. And the other one is this like ghost lady from the first book and who she's traveling with. And again, I didn't really understand she was used later, and so it kind of made sense that you had to know she was still around. But again, her whole point of view just seemed unnecessary. So unfortunately, it was definitely heavily affected by middle book syndrome. I didn't enjoy myself the entire time, but I am still looking forward to the third one because I still enjoy like kind of what's going on and the characters that we've met. So we are in the home stretch here, and I'm really happy to say that my last 3 books are all 5 stars, and I absolutely love them. The next one being Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray. This is a book I read for herbology, which the subject was a plant with a really strange name, like Membletonium or something. And so the prompt was to read a book starting with an M. So I was actually really excited that I got this prompt because I've been looking forward to this book. This is a Star Wars themed novel about Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi before the events of the first movie. And what I kind of expected was sort of like a fun romp. Like if you watch the first movie, you kind of just think, oh, it's just going to be Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan like doing a mission and being all like whatever with each other. Like,
You were right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short.
I don't know. I didn't know what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be kind of lighthearted, if anything. But it was actually incredibly deep. Like, they went through a lot. They presented a lot of moral dilemma and choices. And, like, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, though they work really together as a team in the midst of, like, chaos or, like, fighting or when, like, lives are on the line.
You saved my again!
What's this?
A local. Let's get out of here before more droids show up.
But they always then kind of go back to fighting about what's the right way to do something. And not only that, but you actually get some of Qui-Gon Jinn's perspective when he was a student training under Dooku. So you get a lot of depth that I didn't expect. And then it was kind of fun seeing the little nods to parts of the future movies that you end up recognizing. So I absolutely love this one. I couldn't believe how deep it was, and I honestly don't see why you wouldn't read it. If you're an Obi-Wan fan, if you're a Qui-Gon fan, if you're a Star Wars fan, I highly recommend it. So the book I read after that is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. I read this for my divination class. The subject was... There wasn't really a subject, but the prompt was to basically pick a bunch of books, assign them a number, and then randomly pick one of the numbers using a number generator, and end up landing on The Rage of Dragons. So if you guys haven't heard of this one, I would actually be surprised because this book kind of blew up as everyone's favorite book, and they're like, wow, this is a first-time author's book. This really raises the bar. And honestly, I 100% agree. This was the other book that I read this month that made it to my all-time favorites list. It is a incredibly deep and tragic tale. I almost don't want to say tragic, but it's a really hard tale. You're following this guy who basically gets his whole life kind of ruined and chooses to get revenge. And you basically see him slowly lose his humanity to gain something else that will help him get his revenge. And so it's just slowly watching this man break, but at the same time become so much stronger. And Mr. Winter, he did this incredible job of setting up little breadcrumbs that I wouldn't say had the huge plot impact of Brandon Sanderson's books, but they were cleverly done. They were so little and nuanced that when you get to the part where it becomes important, you're like, wow, I can't believe that little thing ended up causing this bigger thing down here. So I thought this was great. If you guys don't know, it also has really great representation. Excuse my ignorance, but it definitely seems to be based off of African culture. The audiobook narrator was amazing, and he does kind of have that African accent. It's sort of like a mix. In the story in general, you kind of get this Black Panther meets Spartacus vibe. So it's really interesting that way. I feel it's really nice to see a diverse author write just this incredible fantasy story. So lastly, I read Injustice: Gods Among Us Year 2. This is the second book in the Injustice comic series. This one's going to be kind of hard to talk about because there's a lot of things to it. So first off, you probably started with the video game if you even know what Injustice is, the very first video game. And these comic books, these years actually take place before the video game. But you still usually play the video game before the comics. So I read Injustice for the Potions OWL. The potion's subject was a shrinking solution, so the prompt was to read a book that was under 150 pages. According to Goodreads, this was like 500 pages. But granted, it's a comic book, so like every page feels like probably reading like one paragraph in a normal book. So I kind of just didn't pay too much attention to that and just read a shorter book than I would normally read. So to best describe this, again, I'm going to go to my Steelheart example where essentially it's a story about where Superman goes bad. If you played the game, you would know that the way it starts off, Superman is tricked by the Joker into actually killing his wife Lois and their unborn child. This causes him extreme grief and pain to where he actually murders the Joker. And this sort of sets him on this terribly awful downward spiral of a path where he gets more and more of a dictator to basically try to force people to stop being criminals. And so you definitely see this honestly devastating effect where you watch all of your heroes have to basically choose a side and they have to sacrifice their morals to do what they think is right or like for the greater good. So this book, again, is the second year. It's this crazy incredible war with the Green Lantern Corps and it has a lot of other little things to it. And honestly, I thought it was great. It raises a very interesting question. It's got some great character moments. The artwork is amazing, and it was a perfect way to end the month. So yeah, that is my list of my 8 books. I was very happy with this. I was super excited to pass my O.W.L.S. I am looking forward to the newts. I actually did not participate in these last year, so I don't know how much different it is, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. Let me know below if you guys have read any of these books and what you thought about them, and if you did your own W.L.S and have a video on YouTube, definitely link that below. I'd love to go and watch that and see what you guys did. So that will be it for me. Thanks guys, and you'll have a great day. Bye.